Hey, good morning. Happy Fuse Sunday, everybody. Woo! It is really cool to see you guys. My name is Luke. I'm one of the pastors, and I want to add my welcome, especially those of you who are guests with us. I don't think you could have picked a better Sunday to be here, even though everything is totally different, because this really gives you a sense of our heart for the next generation. One of our strategies here is that we fight for kids and families, and so that means we just sometimes go crazy, and that's kind of what Fuse Weekend is. So that's really fun. And students, I love you guys. I'm just delighted that you're part of our church, and you're not just the church of tomorrow and of the future, you're the church of right now. And you mean a ton to us. So many of you serve the church. Actually, we had to tell the rest of the volunteers in kids ministry, you may not call in sick this weekend because so many students are at Fuse. And so thank you for the way you already participate in the life of the church and serve the church. And I'm so excited. And do we have any seniors? Any seniors here today? Last Fuse. You guys made it. Oh, this is my group from last year. Are we going to start? Can we cry now? Can we start crying now? Okay. But man, so good to see you guys. And man, just praise God for the mentors. Holy smokes. I don't know exactly who gets what seats in the throne room of heaven, but I imagine when we get there, the mentors will be closer than the rest of us. And really grateful for them. So this is a fun message because what I try to do at Fuse is speak to the students, but I also have the opportunity today to really combine it with the series that we've been in. So Fuse is all about fusing students to the Lord and to each other and to their mentors and to the church. And this series we've been in is all about relationships. We've called it Lies About Love. Each week we're looking at a different lie that we tell ourselves about relationships. And so the last few weeks have been more like romantic relationships. We're shifting gears really for the rest of the series, and it's going to be less about romantic relationships and just relationships in general and how to do those well. And so we're going to look at something that I think combines Fuse and this series, Lies About Love. And to introduce it, I learned a phrase that I had not heard of. I learned this just recently. I was familiar with the phrase FOMO, right? We've heard that. That's been around for a little while. That's not new to most of us probably. FOMO is the fear of missing out, right? Like, oh man, all these people are doing these cool things and look at what they're posting online and and I don't get to be part of it, and the fear of missing out. But I heard of another phrase that I like a lot. Some of you are going to like it too much, actually, and this is the phrase JOMO. Have you heard of JOMO? JOMO is the joy of missing out. JOMO is, thank God I don't have to go to that. I didn't want to go anyway. And one less thing to do, right? I first heard of that from a woman in our church who, she's working and she's got older kids. And it's like, great, one less thing to do, JOMO. I've got JOMO, right? Like she actually said like the pandemic was like the best thing that ever happened to her. She didn't want to go to anything anyway. So some of you are like that, and it's just a relief to not have to do anything because of whatever. And that relates actually to the lie that we're looking at here today. The lie we want to confront and challenge and correct is this: I'm better off alone. I'm better off alone. That's what a lot of us think when it comes to relationships and friendships. I'm better off alone. We tell ourselves that. We tell ourselves that in lots of different times. Sometimes we tell ourselves that because we've experienced a friendship that just didn't go very well, and we felt betrayed and we felt let down, and I expected this, but they didn't come through for me. You know what? I'm better off alone. Sometimes we just tell ourselves that when we already feel lonely, but we don't want to feel as bad about feeling lonely. Right, that experience where you're like, I don't totally know where I fit. Like some of you, you know the experience. You've had at different stages of your life as a kid. And growing up as a student, like where you're in the lunchroom, like kind of looking around, do I fit anywhere? Is there anywhere for me to go? I actually had this just this week, right? This doesn't change when you become an old man like me. I was born in the late 1900s. I'm still experiencing that. I went this thing this week, and it was like grab a box lunch and then find somewhere to sit. And I'm like looking around, like, do I know anybody? Do I know anybody? And so sometimes when you feel lonely, you don't like it. It's a negative feeling, and so you just tell yourself, well, you know what? I'm just better off alone. Other times, people's relationship expectations of you are just so high. You're like, I can't even meet this. This is like unbearable. I'm just better off alone. Sometimes you're going through something that's really difficult. It's really painful, and you know that if you bring other people into it, it's going to be hard for them, and it's going to create a burden for them. And so you don't want to disclose it to them or tell them, or you don't want to burden them. You don't want to be a burden, so you just tell yourself, well, I'm just better off alone. sometimes the relationship was really good. It was really sweet. But it had to come to an end. They moved away, or they passed away. And you love them, and you love them so much, and it hurts so bad when they have to go. And you just think, like, part of you just kind of makes a vow, like, I can't hurt like this again. I'm better off alone. So it's not a crazy thought to have. There's lots of times when it makes sense to have a thought like that. And sometimes it's actually true, right? Like if you think about some relationships are so toxic, they're so unhealthy, they're so abusive, they're so manipulative, that actually you'd be better off alone because the way people treat you is degrading your humanity. Like you would be better off alone. Other relationships, like their influence on you, their pressure on you, the things that start to feel normal in that friend group are actually bad for you. And they're hurting you, and they're sinful, and they're wrong, and they're unhealthy, and they're not good. And you actually would be better off alone than to be influenced in some of these negative directions. And then sometimes life is just so overwhelming and so filled with words and media and things, and you just need, your soul is like aching for some solitude, some quiet. And that is a situation where you're better off alone. And what I realized bringing into this conversation is like a lot of us just have different senses of needs and expectations based off of just our personalities, the family we grew up in. Some people like just don't need many friends. Like you're just kind of naturally super introverted, naturally like to have a lot of time by yourself. Like JOMO is your kind of constant state of being. Right? Others of you, like you would spend every waking second connected to somebody, right? Like one of our kids is like this. A few of our kids are like this actually. And one of them, like we had to be like, all right, Hank, we're going to have Hank play with Hank time now because you need to learn how to be alone, right? So like your personality, like for me, like I'm an only child. Do I have any only children in the room? Hold your hand up high. That's right. Just there's not very many of us, okay? We got to stick together. And what I found is like I'm really good at being alone, and I like being alone, but I also realized as an only child, if I was going to have friends, I had to go make them. So I can like be extroverted, be introverted. Sometimes I go make all these friends, and then I don't actually want to be with them anymore. And it's like I'm not always a very good friend, I think, because of that. So we bring that. But here's what we're going to see in Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verse 9. This is the confrontation. This is the truth in the midst of that lie. The confrontation is that friends are actually really good. Look at verse 9 of chapter 4, Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9. Two are better than one because they have a good reward for their toil. Two are better than one. They have a good reward for their toil. In the face of the lie that says I'm better off alone, we want to say the truth that friends are really good. My daughter Caitlin is she's a sophomore. Sophomore girls in the house today. And she had a project for Spanish class the other day, and like, you know, we're hanging out in the kitchen. She's doing her homework, and like, you know, and she all of a sudden asked me this like super deep question. She goes, "Dad, in your opinion, which is more important, school, sports, my future, or personal relationships?" I'm like, what's going on? Why are you asking me some random deep question? Like, that's not like you, right? She said, well, it's this project for Spanish class. I said, okay. I said, well, ask your mom. And I'm kidding around, but I really did say that. And the reason is I thought once I answer it, my answer is going to be so good that Molly's going to have to agree with it. No, not really. What I thought was, like, I think we're actually so on the same page, Molly and I, that, like, I want to hear what mom says, and I think it'll actually be exactly what I would say. And it turns out that is exactly what it was the same. Again, here's the question. Which is more important, school, sports, your future, or personal relationships? Why? And what Molly said is exactly what I would have said, which is personal relationships. And the reason is because we're made in the image of a relational God. God has eternally existed, Father, Son, and Spirit, one God, three persons. God has always been in relationship. And we're made in his image. Therefore, our life is only as good as the quality of our relationship. So sports and school and all that stuff, that matters, but it doesn't matter as much. And so to just make sure she can explain it to you, I want to have Caitlin. Come on, Caitlin. So Caitlin, Tell us in Spanish what your parents told you. Yep, it's on. Yeah, you got to do it. Go ahead. Stand up. You can do it. Everyone, give a hand for Kayla.
Okay, las relaciones personales son más importantes para mis padres porque porque piensan que la calidad de mi vida es mejor si tengo relaciones personales buenas. Creen que si hago bien en los deportes y en la escuela y tengo un futuro exitoso, pero no tengo relaciones personales buenas, voy a estar triste y tener una vida mala. Estoy de acuerdo porque me encantan mis amigos y mi familia y las relaciones personales son más importantes para mí.
Y ¿cómo se dice en español? I now hate my father. Good job, honey. I had to embarrass you. She got 40 out of 40 for her answer on her thing, so I love you. Oh man, I enjoyed that too much, I think. Is that the verse where it says, don't provoke your children to anger? Anyway, friends are really good. And your life is as good as the quality of your friendships. Here's one of the ways we know this, is that actually the way you evaluate how fuse went in many ways will be, how did it go with your friends? If you had a good weekend with your group, good weekend with your friends, you like go, yeah, this was good. If it's like, I still kind of feel like an outsider, you're going to be like, yeah, this was a tough weekend. So here's what it says. 2 are better than 1 because they have a good reward for their toil. This word toil is just a very general word. It means an endeavor, a project, something you do. It doesn't have to be like any big thing. He's just saying, like, listen, many hands make light work. It's better to have help. It's better to do this together. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And you don't even have to be super close. Like, it's interesting, friendship and like a really tight relationship isn't even what's mentioned here. It's just saying more people. 2 are better than 1. You don't have to be super close. You just don't want to be alone. And sometimes we think that for a friendship to count, it has to be like super deep and super thick and share all this history and all this stuff. And that's not true. We need to actually appreciate that some of the casual relationships in our lives are actually meaningful. Right? I've read about these 4 spaces of belonging, and it's helped me a ton. The idea that there's one space is like a public space. It's where you feel like you belong. You don't know people well, but they know you're there. Right? This is like you go to the sports bar and you're like high-fiving people because they're wearing the same color shirt as you, and you have no idea who they are. But man, it's so much better than watching it alone, isn't it? Right? So that's public space. Then there's social space. Social space is they know your name. They don't just know you're there, they know your name. And this is like a lot of our small group environments and class environments and serving with somebody, you get to know them a little bit. You know maybe their name and a little bit more, but it's not a super deep thing. But man, if you're not there, they're like, hey, we missed you. It's meaningful. Then there's personal space. And personal space isn't just they know your name and they know you're there. They actually know your business. They know what's really going on in your life. They know a little bit more of what's making you tick. They know a little bit more of the struggles you're facing and the challenges you're facing. Right? And then there's intimate space. In an intimate space, they don't just know you're there. They don't just know your name. They don't just know your business. They know your secrets. By the way, you probably, most people in life only have maybe 1, maybe 2 intimate, they know my secrets relationships. And that's good. Sometimes one of the things we do in church world is we try to force every relationship to be personal and intimate. Where you feel like if I'm not disclosing my most recent sin, I'm not being authentic. No, if everyone in your life knows all your secrets, you're really weird. And you don't, and I'm explaining to you now why people act weird around you, because that's unhealthy and strange. And so we need to appreciate, like, hey, not every relationship has to be the deep end of the pool. These other relationships matter a lot too. So you might be a student here feeling like, you know what, my best friends really are at school. They don't even go to church here. Like, okay, that's fine. But these relationships still matter. These ones still are important because two are better than one. They have a good reward for their toil. So Ralph Waldo Emerson, the poet, he said this: the only way to have a friend is to be one. So what I want to do with this message is really explain like how to be a friend, how to be a good friend. Because we could just go, well, here's how to go look for friends. That's not what this is about. But actually, what the author of Ecclesiastes, Solomon, what he's doing is he's saying two are better than one. And let me give you three examples, three illustrations of why that's true. And so he's going to give an example of someone falling. He's going to give an example of someone who's cold. He's going to give an example of someone who's attacked. And this is going to instruct us and show us how to be a friend. So here's the kind of friends we're going to be. We will be friends who, number one, prop up when they're falling. Prop up when they're falling. Look at verse 10. It says, for two are better than one, for if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who's alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. If you fall down and there's no one to help you, that's big trouble. Right, a lot of senior adults will talk about the risk and the danger of all sorts of bad health outcomes after a serious fall. And one of the things that's especially serious as people age and if they live alone is the danger of falling when no one else is there, right? This is why you see these ads, daytime TV, for like, hey, here's this thing that you can have with you at all times so that if you fall, you can page for help. Because woe to him who's alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Now, that's obviously talking about like literal falling. This verse is really just saying, hey, in all kinds of ways in relationships, people fall. Sometimes we fall because of our own fault. Sometimes we fall just the circumstance is bad. We get knocked down and we need someone to help us get back up. We got to prop up each other. We got to pull up each other when we're falling. There's a number of examples about this in the Bible. In Exodus 17, there's an example where you see that the people of Israel are fighting against the Amalekites, and Moses, who's the leader of the people, is kind of up on a hill and he's watching this battle play out. And at some point he figures out, and I cannot for the life of me figure out how he would have figured this out. But he figures out that whenever his hands are up, Israel is winning. And when he lowers his hands, the Amalekites are winning. I'm just so curious. How did he figure that out? That's so... Anyway, so they figure this out. Somehow they figure it out. Maybe his friends told him. And so Moses is in his 80s, and he's standing there all day trying to hold his hands up, but they keep drooping because it's hard to stand there all day and hold your hands up. And so his friends roll over a rock, it says, so that he can at least sit down on the rock. And then they sit on each side of him, and they hold up his arms and propel the people of Israel to victory. That's a picture of friendship. It's a picture of together. It's a picture of we're strong when we prop up people whose lives are falling. Another example we find in Mark chapter 2, right? This weekend you looked at the story of the man born blind in John 9, right? There's another incredible healing story in Mark chapter 2. In Mark chapter 2, there's this man who's paralyzed, and we don't know why he's paralyzed. It doesn't specify that it was from birth, but he's paralyzed, but he still has these friends who haven't forgotten him. I don't know exactly what happened to him. I imagine maybe at some point he was in an accident or something, and it became harder to be his friend, right? Like, hey, we're not playing tag anymore. No more hide and seek. No more basketball. But they didn't turn on him. Instead, they were like, hey, we're going to keep loving this guy. And then they hear that Jesus is there, and who is this guy? Maybe he can do something about this. And Jesus is gathered in this home, and it's so packed. It's like standing room only. No one can get in, so they're trying to get in because they're thinking, like, if our friend could just get near Jesus, Jesus could do something. And so suddenly Jesus is teaching, and all of a sudden dirt starts falling from the ceiling, and it sounds like there's this scraping and pounding up there, and it's like, what's going on? And they look up, and the friends of this paralyzed man are digging a hole in the roof so that they can lower him down. And it says an amazing thing in Mark 2. It says, when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the man, your sins are forgiven. Isn't that interesting? It doesn't say when he saw the paralytic's faith. It says when he saw the friend's faith. Some of you, you're like, I don't know where my friends are. I don't know if they're believing. I don't know if they're holding on to Jesus. Okay, will you hold on for them? Yeah, I don't know what Jesus sees when he sees their faith, but what does he see when he sees your faith for them? This is what friendship is. We prop up when they're falling. A lot of times we see a friend falling, we're like, stinks for them. Bummer, dude. That's going to hurt. Right? There's like whole YouTube channels dedicated to just watching people biff. Right? It's actually kind of fun. But when you see a train wreck unfolding in front of you with your friends, and you go, stinks to be them, that's not a very good friend. By the way, what this also means is that we don't just have to be friends who prop people up when they fall, but we have to be people willing to receive a hand up when we fall. See, a lot of us, we love to be the one to help, because then we get to feel like a hero. But when we need help, we don't want to. And you know what that's called? That's called pride. Because what you're saying is, I'm the kind of person that never needs help. No. You're the kind of person who falls. Just like me, all of us. So we're going to be friends who prop up when people are falling. Second thing we'll be is we're going to be people who press in. We're going to be friends who press in when they're cold, right? Falling may or may not be someone's fault, but cold is certainly not anyone's fault. You can't control that, right? And the whole idea here is that two are better than one in this project, in this journey, in this path they're going. Sometimes on this path of life, sometimes on this journey of life, someone's going to fall and they need to be propped up. Other times it's just going to be cold and things are going to be out of their hands, but you need to press in when they're cold. Look at verse 11. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? If two lie together, they keep warm. Now, this is feels a little uncomfortable, but you imagine this journey, right? You didn't pack up this great sleeping bag, and you don't have a great heater, right? This reminds me of this movie from like my generation, where these guys are out on this trip, and they get stranded in this cave, and they're like cold, and it's raining, and it's freezing, and one of them is like, well, I guess we're going to have to snuggle together for warmth or we'll die. The other friend goes, then I choose death. Right? Right? So some of the imagery of this just makes us a little uncomfortable, but the whole idea is this, is that a friend shares resources. A friend says, I'll get out of my comfort zone in order to help you. A friend says, hey, we'll get through this together. Stick with me. So we're going to be friends who prop up when they're falling, who press in when they're cold, and then third, from verse 12, we're going to be friends who push back when they're attacked. Who push back when they're attacked. Look at verse 12. And though a man might prevail against one who's alone, two will withstand him. So the picture is imagining someone attacking these people who are on this journey. If you're going by yourself, man, you're vulnerable to this attack. And though a man might prevail against one who's alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. Notice the contrast in a couple of words there in verse 12. The contrast between the word might and the word will. Though a man might prevail against one who's alone. In other words, if it's a one-on-one fight, you might win. It says two will withstand him. If you have two against one, you will win. And this, friends, this is the test of true friendship. Will someone come to your defense? Will I come to your defense? And here's what I found is it's actually easier to think about coming to the defense physically for someone who's in physical danger. Like we've told all of our kids, they've never had to act on this, but we've told all of them, listen, if you see someone like getting bullied and picked on and being physically attacked, you have our total green light permission to knock their lights out. Just do your best to finish the fight. That's kind of our, but they've never had to do that. And that would take a level of courage, but in a way it's kind of like easier. Like it's not that hard to like try to step up against a big, extravagant, aggressive bully. Like that feels heroic. You know what takes a little more courage? You're sitting there at lunch. One girl gets up. The other girls start going, can you believe she blah, 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 blah. And by the way, you know that if they'll say that about her, they'll say that about you. You're there in the locker room, the other guy leaves, they start talking trash about him. If they say it about him, they'll say it about you. And so what takes real courage isn't to fight a bully. What takes real courage is in that moment to step up and to say, hey, don't talk like that about her. That's not kind. That's not how we're going to be friends. Now, I realize most of us would be like, yeah, right, I'll never do that. Do you know what that would cost me? Do you know how hard that would be? Yeah. But that's what a friend does. It pushes back when they're attacked. And here's the other thing, is in a world of spiritual hostility, this means that we got to fight for each other's faith. Because this is a world that is not nurturing to your faith. It's not nurturing to your commitment to Christ. And what I see in this generation, what I see in our church is this strong desire to know the Lord, this strong desire to connect with Jesus, this strong desire to live a life that honors him and that is devoted to him and that's committed to him. You want to see the blessing of God pour into your life. You want to see the blessing of God pour through you into others. I see in this generation, a generation of people hungry for the Lord. You go, how do you see that? Well, I see that as I interact with you, but I walk around and I see on these walls, and everyone else, you're going to get a chance a little later in the service to join in and write your prayers on these walls. But what these walls are filled with is your prayers. And I walked around in tears before the service reading your prayers. And what I see in these prayers is you are fighting. And it is not easy. Some of you are writing, I believe, help my unbelief. God, forgive me for this temptation. God, when will it get easier? God, I really want my friends to know you, right? These are all prayers up there and more. And you're fighting, and this is a fight. This is why when we talk as a church, we fight for kids and families. We didn't say, we hope to help kids and families. No, we got to fight because it's not easy. It's hard. And so will you be a person who prays? Will you be a friend who encourages? Will you be a friend who is even willing to have a hard conversation with someone that you see going down a path that you know they don't want to say, listen, I am not trying to judge you. I just know that this isn't the life you've said you want to live. And can I help you? Can I encourage you, right? It's sending that text. It's driving over. It's doing that thing. It's intervening with love and with prayer and with encouragement because we have to fight for each other. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. So this is the kind of friends that we're invited to be in this text, is those who prop up when they're falling, those who press in when they're cold, and those who push back when they're attacked. And I want to tell you, if you do those three things, you will be a good friend. Now, here's what's hard, is if you're a good friend like that, that doesn't necessarily mean people will be good friends back. A lot of times it will. Because I think in our world, so people are so hungry for a friend like that. Like, I think that you'll have more friends than you know what to do with most of the time. But there'll always be someone where you feel like, man, I'm giving this much and they're giving back this much. What do you do when that happens? Where do you find help? Well, I actually think that the Christian story gives us help for that, gives us resources for that, because at the heart of the Christian story is Jesus. And Jesus himself experienced friends who let him down, and they let him down big time. I mean, think about it. Jesus pours himself into these 12 friends, and one of them, Judas, betrays him, and he betrays him with an act of friendship. Right? The way Jesus is betrayed by Judas is Judas kisses him, right? This would be the greeting of the day. This would be like, dapping him up. This would be like knuckles or a high five, like, hey, Jesus, great to see you, buddy. That's the way that Judas betrays his friend. And then maybe Jesus' best friend, Peter. Hey, aren't you friends with that guy, Jesus? I've never even heard of him, man. 3 times. Jesus knows it's not better off to be alone, and it's time to go to the garden and to pray, because he's about to face the biggest trial ever, and he's not going, well, I don't want to be a burden to them. So he says to Peter, James, and John, will you guys come pray with me? And they keep falling asleep. All Jesus knows is what it's like to have lousy friends. And so if anyone in the world would be justified to go, I'm better off alone, it'd be Jesus, wouldn't it? And yet, what does Jesus do? Jesus doesn't just not give up on these guys, but he actually then goes to the ultimate level of friendship. Because here's what it says in John chapter 15, verse 13. Greater love has no one than this, that somebody lay down his life for his friends. There's no love bigger than this, Jesus says, if someone lays down their life for his friends. And I'm going to lay down my life for you, my friends. That's what Jesus does. And so when you feel like, man, they betrayed me, man, they ignored me, man, they denied me, man, they just have let go. Listen, you have a friend who will stick closer than a brother. You have a friend in Jesus who said, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. Even when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I'll be with you. And so the Christian story not only gives you the resources to be a great friend, but it gives you the ability to actually experience friendship from the Lord himself, even when people aren't a good friend to you. This weekend has been awesome, and I hope this year is awesome. And it will be awesome to the degree that your relationships are good. And if you're a friend who props up when they're falling and presses in when they're cold and pushes back when they're attacked, you'll be a good friend. And it'll be a good year. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your grace and kindness to us. Thank you that you are a good friend and that we get to experience your care and your love. And we thank you. We praise you. And we know that you are good. In Jesus' name, amen.